He looks like he was on an island just doing push-ups and lifting weights for 6 months. Our friend Danny Kanell, you can find him with Dusty and Danny on SiriusXM. You can find him on the Cover 3 pod with our buddy, the human computer, Bud Elliott. But DK, what's up, man?
How we doing? I'm glad somebody noticed the workouts I've been doing to try to keep up with my wife, who's like, she's a fitness freak. Yesterday, I did the Murph, which was pretty cool, Memorial Day Challenge to honor Michael Murphy. So I made it through that. So yeah, everything's good, man. Summer is officially here.
Yes, and which means football season, while it never ends, is right around the corner. And I wanted to talk to you for a second, not about the SEC softball slander. I'm not going to get in that right now. But my brother... And look, you're a Florida State guy. We're all fans of somebody, right? Like, I hate when people are like, oh, well, I'm not a fan of anybody. Well, then that makes you a freak. I mean, nobody's not a fan of anybody. But Danny, this man over here to my right, they did a chat GBT thing while I was up in France repping the American flag, and said that Tim Tebow was the most overrated college quarterback. Not quarterback. You can talk NFL. We can talk about that till the cows come home. I'll agree with you. We'll shake hands across America style. All right. But saying that Tim Tebow was an overrated college quarterback to me is absolutely should get you on the first boat to Shutter Island.
Home, Danny.
That is college football blasphemy. If they're ever like, that could get you excommunicated. That could get you excommunicated for having any sort of opinion on college football. I do think so. Here's what I do think though with Tebow. And I think this comes up because we did this, when they came out with the list of the top, quarterbacks in the top 20 years. And I had Tebow number 1 over Baker Mayfield, who was one. I think it was Bill Connolly's list. Here's the thing that's really hard with any of these lists. 1, there's a recency bias. 2, I think what's really hard to eliminate is what happened in the NFL. And I think that if you start saying, and you remember how bad it got there towards the end. And I know he had the run in Denver, but then how it kind of fell apart and he had to switch positions and he was just trying to hang on. It's hard to erase that from your brain. But if you go back and plant yourself in the landscape of college football, when he was at Florida and you look at the amount of records that he broke, SEC records that stood for a long, long time that he was able to break and then bring a championship and a half. I don't give him 2 championships. I give him a championship and a half for splitting that one with Chris Leak. But you forget the phenomenon that was Tim Tebow. And I get you could think the overrated was a lot had to do with that attention and having a sports center on Saturday afternoon. That was a Tim Tebow sports center. I get all of that. But if you strip it all away and you look at what he did on the field and what he brought to the Florida Gators in college football, I think he was properly rated for sure.
Yeah. Glorified running back at quarterback. That's what he was.
See, again,
but he still played quarterback.
There's nothing that demands you throw the ball, though.
Like at quarterback?
No, as long as you win. Like if he lost every game, you'd be like, why do we have a running back?
That's like That's like saying Eric Crouch sucks. Like it's just like
Tebow. Eric wasn't a bad thrower.
Compared to Tim Tebow,
Tim Tebow was not a great thrower at all. And if you put Tim Tebow in any roster slightly below what they had, the absolute Jeff Dips, Patrick Rainey.
Remember though, but he did throw the football and guys were wide open. Like he had Percy Harvin and he had
Dan Mullen's really good.
He had all these weapons, but he still executed those throws. It wasn't like he handed off and he was just running the ball. He still made some big time throws.
Well, yeah, I would say he made some big time throws throughout his career in college. But we're talking about Tim Tebow being the greatest college quarterback.
That's not what we're saying. No, that's where
Danny just said he put him in first.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we're not arguing. I just made this point. We're not arguing is Cam Newton better than Tim Tebow. So I would take Cam Newton over. Cam Newton won a national championship as close to by himself as anybody I've ever seen in college.
I want y'all to know this
But to say he's overrated is asinine.
The guys we had to choose off this list that got brought up. Let me tell you who was on this list, all right? Reggie Bush was on this list. Jadeveon Clowney was on this list. What I saw out of this list were 2 guys that were overrated. All right?
I would take Tim Tebow over Jadeveon Clowney.
Brady Quinn and Tim Tebow. That's who I'm taking.
Brady's all-time leader in passing yards at the most historic college football program of all time.
He went to Notre Dame. He went to Notre Dame, Dan. Sorry, not Michigan.
You taking Matt Leinart or Brady Quinn?
Oh, man, those are both my guys.
Thank you, Danny. It's not the greatest situation over here.
Isn't Matt Leinart just the left-handed Brady Quinn?
That's a very good point. And if Brady had the weapons that Matt Leinart did, maybe he would have had the national championship and Heisman Trophy one, as well. With all of these lists, because I think it's interesting. You brought up Cam Newton. So, like, what do you value? Is it because I think it's a different conversation if you told me, give me one quarterback for either one game or a second half or a clutch performance. For me, it's Joe Burrow, hands down. 2019 Joe Burrow.
That's not a bad
Cam
argument.
Newton, just slightly. Cam took over games because of his physical just superiority. Like when he broke open the Superman, it was like he really was Superman and was able to just run dudes over. Burrow, for me, by far, one game, you put him up against anybody, he picks you up from the pocket, he's got his brain, he's got elusivity, he can still run. But I think in these lists that you talk about, greatest of all time or since 2000 or whatever it is, you do have to consider resume. So I didn't have Cam Newton or Joe Burrow as a top option because they only played, in Cam's case, 1 year, in Burrow's case 2, but the first one was so like weird and it was a transition year that I didn't include him. So I think you have to look at the total body of work when you do these lists.
Yeah, it is. And again, you brought up the NFL. It's hard to kind of just nail it down to the college career and put yourself back in that moment. But I do want to shift gears for a second here, Danny. The SEC, you look at Greg Sankey coming out and talking about how it's not looking like they're going to go to a 9-game in-conference schedule, basically because of the TV stuff. All right, that's what it's going to come down to, the extra money that the SEC would have to get from ESPN. We know they're going to it eventually. Greg Sankey even alluded to it. My whole thing is I just feel like it's a much better system. Get rid of divisions in the SEC, and that way you have a 9-game in-conference schedule in 2024 when you add Texas and Oklahoma, when the college football playoff expands, when we see even more of this conference expansion. I just feel like you rip the Band-Aid off and do it. I understand TV, money rules the world. Just what are your thoughts on the SEC maybe waiting another year to go to 9-game in-conference schedule?
I totally agree. Unfortunately, college football, and we've seen this impact in the last 5 years, is beholden to the TV, the broadcast networks. We just really are. And it's because they are the driver. They're the ones that are cutting the checks, these massive checks, which are changing the actual landscape of college football, especially when you look about these are just massive earthquake type moves when you see Oklahoma, Texas to the SEC and USC, UCLA to the Big Ten. And who knows what the next one is, because we all know it's coming. It's just a matter of when is it coming. But unfortunately, that's the reality of where we are right now. I think the bigger problem is not only does the SEC need to go to 9 games, everybody does. Everybody needs to go to the same scheduling process. And I don't know how that happens without people getting on the same page. But then you've got all these commissioners who are just looking out for the best interest of their conference. There's no overarching body like the NCAA, which is powerless recently. But we need somebody to come in and say, no, this is what's best for college football. We're all going to go to 9 conference games. We're going to have one of those non-conference games be another Power 5 school, and then you can choose 2 games. And then when we get to the point where we start choosing those top 12 teams, when we get to the expanded playoff, then when we look at resumes, we're actually comparing apples to apples as opposed to apples to oranges, which what we've been doing. When we look at all those criteria that the selection committee comes up with every Tuesday night, it's almost impossible to compare them because they're so different across the board.
Could not agree more. You need the best scouting report possible, because we know that buying a new car can be one of the biggest purchases you make. It can be a stressful experience for anyone, especially if you're a first-time buyer or have no credit. But before you walk into a dealership and you spend the entire day with crowds and Jackie Schaefer and all these other guys, you need to check out our friends over at CarZing, CARZING. They're completely changing the way you buy a car online. They partner with credit agencies, lenders, and over 25,000 dealers nationwide, and they give you everything you need before stepping foot into a dealership. So once you find the right car at your ideal budget, all you have to do is bring in your Save Deal voucher with you to the dealership to finalize your next ride. It's the best scouting report in the car game. You will feel prepared, you will be jacked, and you will be tan. They help make the experience faster, cheaper, and less stressful. Dave, we talk about this a lot. Car's a big purchase.
It is.
Better Eric Spoelstra your way into the dealership.
No, I love that. It's other than a house, really, it's one of the biggest purchases you're going to make in your life. And there's not a lot of practice for it. Like, unless you go buy a car.
Unless you're a
practice buying a car.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to deal with Matilda's father before I know, like, well, I'm checking out what's going on. And Blaine, you bought a Lamborghini. I mean, you had to look into that.
Yeah, getting a Lamborghini is not that easy unless you have cars.
That's
exactly. And the thing about cars is cool. Even if you don't want a car, you're window shopping, baby. That's what it is. Hop on in there. They got all your personal preferences. You can find the exact match you want. You got to buy it right now. Hey, we'll tag it for later.
All right, so you need to go to carzing.com/booster. That's carzing.com/booster. BOOSTER. I'm assuming that everybody can read at that level and know how to spell booster, but I'll spell it for you anyway. That's carzing.com/booster. Be prepared for the ride of your life.
Danny, there's a lot of hype for the Florida State Seminoles this year, man. First winning season last year in the last 5. Mike Norvell entering year 4. You're going to have Jordan Travis returning at quarterback. But you go on the road to Clemson. They go on the road to Florida. And then the one that everybody's talking about, week 1, FSU, LSU. Right now, do you have Florida State making the college football playoff?
Man. See, now you put me on a spot like that
Danny.
Right away. So I'm nervous for Florida State. I feel like a nervous Nelly because I've kind of preferred last year the way they kind of flew under the radar and they had this chip on their shoulder and they had to prove to the world that they were going to be competitive again. And I thought the team really embraced that. And it was one of the things that kind of drove them to get back in the conversation. Now, this entire offseason, everyone's picking them to win the ACC. They're picking them to get to the playoff. Here's why. I'll stick with Florida State to make the playoff for a couple of reasons. One, I think the leadership on this team, Jared Verse on the defense side of the ball, Jordan Travis on the offensive side of the ball, and then a laundry list of other players who decided to come back to Florida State to do something special that hasn't been done in recent memory. For a lot of these players, don't remember when Florida State was in the first playoff or when they won a national championship in 2013. They don't remember that. So they want to do something special this time around. So I think the mindset is healthy. Will they be able to block out the noise? The second part is I get Clemson on the road is a absolute, that's going to be one of those games of the year, right? It's going to be physical. Clemson's not going anyway. They got Garrett Riley come, which I think was the best coordinator hire this offseason. But Florida State can lose that game. And I don't like a loser's mentality. I don't like going in thinking you have a mulligan. But the ACC doing away with divisions, if you take care of your business elsewhere, you can go ahead and play Clemson most likely in the ACC championship game, make up for that loss, and still play your way into the playoff. Now, what is the LSU game? Then what implication does that have? Remains to be seen. But I still think if Florida State represented themselves well in the LSU game, won that game, I think it's a slam dunk. Then you could lose one game. I think if they play LSU tight and they happen to lose to Clemson and then beat Clemson in the ACC championship game, even with 2 losses, I think Florida State would be in that conversation of the playoffs. So yeah, I'll pick them to do it. I don't think it's the 2-loss route. I think there's a better chance they're a 1-loss ACC champion that gets into the playoff.
Agreed. And almost everything you just said about Florida State could be said about LSU, flying under the radar last year in Brian Kelly's first year, couple bad seasons in a row under Ed Orgeron. Then they go and win the SEC West. Now everyone's, sort of picking them with their quarterback returning as well. Do you see LSU sort of being able to win the SEC West again, or will Brian Kelly have more struggles in year 2?
Oh, they definitely can. The SEC West, I think, is wide open. I know Bama's going to be the trendy pick, but they have so many question marks. The thing I don't know about LSU, and again, the Florida State LSU game is going to be so much fun. I mean, it's going to have so many implications. I think it could set one of these programs, much like it did last year. Florida State won the game, propelled them into, a solid season, best one they've had in a while. LSU took a little bit to get going. Then they were just fine on the back end. But I think this game could be similar. I still want to see one more year of them, winning the division before I'm ready to just go crown them and say, yep, they're going to play Georgia in the SEC championship game. I still think there's a couple traps in there, and I want to see how Brian Kelly does in year 2, because there's some things you could look at last year. I mean, the Texas A&M game is a great example. Like, how on earth did they lose that game when Texas A&M was as bad as they were? But I could see them similarly having another slip up or two just in the West alone, where they're not quite that dominant team, which I don't think there is one in the West. But I would be cautious on LSU as that, SEC champion pick. And even if they win the West, I still don't think they can beat Georgia.
Yeah, a couple things real quick. What I've started calling that FSU-LSU game is it's the ultimate insurance game for a couple reasons. One, it's the first game of the year. It's really, really early. If you win it, I think it buys you a loss at Clemson to still be able to be a favorite at the end to make the playoff. If you lose that game and you run the table, or even if you get to 2 losses, that's probably going to be a great loss when it comes down to being able to sneak your way in or backdoor your way in. The second thing, and I get it as a fan of a team, expectations, especially if you haven't had them in a while, can kind of make you nervous. But isn't this who FSU really is? Isn't this why you were an FSU fan growing up? Yeah. Because they did get off the plane wearing camouflage. They wanted the expectations. They wanted you to know that they thought they were going to kick your ass. Everybody else thought they were going to kick your ass. And when they showed up, it's FSU. You did fear the spear. There's a reason they said that. So I think this is kind of deep down. And I know Mike Norvell, you always want that chip on your shoulder, right? Kirby Smart manipulated his team to thinking they were going 7-5 last year. I totally get that. But some places, that intimidation factor, I think, is just different. And there's something about Florida State. And when Chief Osceola is running on that field and planting that fiery spear down in the middle, that just hits different. Florida State is one of those schools that when they're cooking and they're right and they got the right mindset, when they go into the Lions' den, the Lions get nervous. So I kind of feel like this may be a little bit of who FSU really is, Danny. I'm not trying to tell you, you know who FSU is way more than me, but I don't know. That's just how I feel from the outside looking in at Florida State.
So I'll tell you what makes me nervous. And I think even if this was all right, take off my Florida State glasses and colors and say, all right, let's look at that at an objective point. If you were trying to look for flaws in Florida State, because you're right, this is a problem. I was a part of the dynasty that was there for 14 years when we never finished outside the top 4. Like, we were always in the conversation at the end of the season. So if you go back and you dig into the schedule last year, they lost to the 3 best teams they played last year: Clemson, NC State, and Wake, 3 in a row. They played down to some of the Florida on Black Friday had Florida State on the ropes, and Florida State got out with a win on that game. Late in the game, had the defensive stop to win that game. And then the bowl game against a 6-6 Oklahoma team, Oklahoma had a lead early in that game, and Florida State needed to come back. Now, the good news is the Florida State of 3 or 4 years ago would have found ways to lose those games. They would have been 5 losses instead of 3. The good news is they figured out how to win that. But I do wonder just how good this team is from a roster standpoint to still hold up against the likes of Clemson. Now, they've done an outstanding job once again going to get the transfer portal, offensive line help, defensive tackle help. But I really think the Keon Coleman signing at wide receiver could be what puts this offense just over the top, where even if their defense gives up some points against a team like Clemson, NC State, who's going to be throwing around this year, their offense should be able to go toe-to-toe with anybody. And I love Jordan Travis. I love his skill set. I love the intangibles. So that's where I'm just going to go ahead and say, you know what? There might have been some flaws last year, but they're going to be better this year, top to bottom.
Jaheim Bell was the signing I'm looking at. That dude can do. He's a Swiss Army knife, and I was shocked he left South Carolina. Don't be shocked. I'm going to see how many times I can say shocked if he goes nuts this year.
I'm shocked. Danny, one thing I'm not shocked about, but I'm going to forgive you for the mean things you said to me today because I love you. But second of all, you didn't have to flex your golf clubs on us, man. What were those Callaways? What are you out there shooting 80 on a bad day?
He's a quarterback,
I play way too much golf. My guys at Callaway, they do help me out every once in a while with some new clubs. So, I got a prop. Those are just the secondary set. But if there's anything that you know about my golf club, if you look like for a closer inspection, there's about 6 putters in that bag. Because that's my nemesis, the putting game. And it's never my fault. It's the putter's fault. So I just rotate through putters.
You are a golfer. That's the thing about me about golf. The closer I get to the hole, the worse I get.
Yeah.
Texas Ed wants to know, who do you think will go to a bowl game first? Vanderbilt or Colorado?
Colorado. The road to get there for Vanderbilt, just going through the SEC is just so problematic, especially for and I love Clark Lee. My guy Barton Simmons is on the staff as their general manager. I just think they've got so much gap to make up. Who knows where Colorado's going to be, right? Whether they stay in the Pac-12 or they go to the Big 12. It's just an easier road to get there. And you don't have the academic restrictions that you have at Vanderbilt. You don't have the transfer restrictions that you have at Vanderbilt. You've got an NIL program that feels like it's kind of on the up and up, and there's people investing in the program. So I do think Deion will get Colorado to a bowl game. Not this year. I think next year is the realistic year to look for Colorado to make that big jump.
All right, we got a question here for Bradley Cogdale. Danny, who's going to be the most overrated team this season?
Say it,
man. I used to have a field day with Tennessee fans because every year they come in, they're like, "This is our year," and then they totally collapse.
Yeah,
but I do like Heupel. I do wonder if Joe Milton, because they had such outstanding quarterback play in Hendon Hooker. I mean, he had 58 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions in 2 years. Like, that is insane. If Joe Milton is good, I think they'll be back there. When I say I'm trying to think overrated because that's mean. I don't think Tennessee is going to be as good as they were last year. I still think they're going to be good. I'll say, man, this is a good question. Yeah. I'm trying to think. You guys gave me LSU early. All right. I'll say Texas.
I knew it.
Texas. But here's why. The expectation for Texas this year is to win the Big 12. And if it's not this year, when the heck is it? Because Oklahoma's coming off a 500 year. TCU lost a lot. I mean, TCU won a Big 12 or played in the playoff. They didn't win the Big 12. I hear that. They played in the playoff before Texas did. I mean, how bad would that irk you if you were a Longhorn? But now you've got this conference, which is wide open. But when was the last time they lived up to expectations? So until I see it, I'm going to keep fading Texas because that's who they are over the last 10 to 15 years. Is they never meet those expectations. So I'll say Texas.
Definitely. Well, Danny, you always meet our expectations when you come on, my friend. We know you're a busy guy. We're obviously going to get you back as college football season gets closer. It never really leaves, especially with the transfer portal now basically being year-round. But whether it's on SiriusXM, whether it's the Cover 3 pod, tell everybody else, too, on social media where they can find you, my friend.
Oh, pretty much anywhere. I mean, I got mouths to feed. SiriusXM is probably the best spot. Cover 3 pod, CBS Sports HQ. Anywhere that'll cut me a check so I can pay for these 3 girls. You know what it's like, Jake. You just got married. Those weddings aren't cheap. No, and I got 3 of them to pay for down the road. Hopefully.
Oh goodness,
that
Danny.
In college, man, I just got to start saving.
Yeah, that's with my luck, I'll end up with 5 girls. That's 100%. You can start, man. I mean, those Callaways, probably all 6 putters. They probably go for a decent amount. But Danny, it's always great, man. Always enjoy chopping it up with you.
Thanks, fellas. Have a great summer.
Hey, YouTube, appreciate you guys checking us out. If you don't know, we do a live sports show every weekday morning from 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern. That's 6:30 to 8 a.m. Central. Come check us out. We have live call-ins. We interact with the Booster Club, which is our live chat. We have great guests, and we cover everything. And it's sports like you grew up watching.